whales trade and investment here in San Francisco. And tonight we're supporting this event that is presented to you by AngelCube and Slingshot. They are two incubators from Australia. So welcome. Before we dive in, I just want to make sure everybody knows where the restrooms are. So they are down the runway, near the kitchen, and there is a door on the right. Also, I don't care how much you drink, but if you could finish your beers and your wine, that will make it much easier for us to clean up. So this is the second time that we're doing this event. Last year, we also joined forces with AngelCube and another incubator called Szatar. And for those of you who were there last year, there are a few familiar faces. You will know that a Melbourne company won. They were called App.io, and they went on to get into 500 startups, and they raised money, 1.3 million. Was that in May this year? Sure. This year, yeah. So the pressure is on for New South Wales to win this time. So I hope these Slingshot guys are ready to win. Where are you guys? Over there. So we're going to do a quick investment overview by Nathan. Then we are going to introduce the judges and jump straight into the pitches. And we have 9 pitches tonight, so we'll try to get through them as quickly as possible. So Nathan is the co-founder of AngelCube, and he is going to give us a little overview of the Australian startup tech scene.
Thanks very much. Thanks everyone. I'll be brief. So Julia mentioned the fact that it's sort of New South Wales against Victoria today, but I can tell you that the Australian startup scene is very much united. So really, the startup scene in Australia is at a point at the moment where it's becoming more and more investable, and it's becoming more and more exciting. In 2010, it was a big year for Australian startups. Excel came in and made some major investments in companies like Atlassian and 99 Designs, which have now become big names on the startup landscape. And in the following years, there was a whole lot more attention from US investors on that segment. And it bred this ongoing culture of startup. So Brad Feld, one of the co-founders of Techstars, you might be familiar with his talks on startup ecosystems. But he speaks extensively about the role of entrepreneurs in a startup ecosystem. And what we're seeing now is these entrepreneurs who came through and had the experience of building up these high growth companies back in 2010 and beforehand, and giving back to the community. And they're giving back with financial investment, as well as they're bringing their expertise, their networks, and really giving these the next wave of entrepreneurs a chance. And so what we're here to see today is 2 batches from various incubators in Australia. Adrian Stone and I, just in the back there, we co-founded AngelCube 3 years ago, so this is the 3rd intake that we've had. For us, we're really filling a gap in the market. In Melbourne, we have these amazingly organised groups of incredibly talented developers, technology groups that were some of the more organised around the world. There'll be technology meetups of between 50 and 350 people all gathering around. But there wasn't quite that startup ecosystem. There wasn't the drive for innovation and entrepreneurship. So for us, we're very much helping these people move from technology into entrepreneurship, and that's been our main focus. We set about in the early days to incubate technology startups. We had a few different rules. One was no social, and the other one was no hardware. In the 3 years, we've had a very successful social and a very successful hardware startup come through. So we're still a startup ourselves, and we're iterating every year. But essentially, we're very, very open when it comes to what kind of companies come through the program, and we're really, really happy with the sorts of talent that we're seeing and the role of these previous entrepreneurs in the ecosystem today. Slingshot is one of the newer accelerators on the scene. At the moment, there's sort of 3 main accelerators, I'd say. There's AngelCube down in Melbourne. You might be familiar with Startmate up in Sydney. Newcastle's not far from Sydney, yet it's home to a whole different group of entrepreneurs, a whole different group of mentors, and Slingshot have some amazing talent that you're going to hear from tonight. So yeah, that's it from me. I just encourage you to keep your eye on the Australian scene, finding out what's happening. If you guys, I know that I can see there's a lot of Australians here. Be supportive of your fellow Australians. It really does make a difference when you're coming across to the Valley to visit, to be introduced to people. A success story from last year's intake, app.io, ended up being introduced to some of the mentors in the 500 program, which essentially did lead to them becoming part of the 500 intake last year, which then led to them raising their Series A at the start of this year. So there's amazing things that can happen just from your networks in the Valley, so don't take that for granted. Special thanks to the judges tonight, and I'll get Julia to introduce them, but thanks very much.
So I'll introduce our first judge, who's going to talk a little bit about Runway as well, Alan Young. So Alan is the brainchild behind this space, Runway. And a little known fact about Alan, well, unless you look on his LinkedIn profile, is that he did an MBA with Seth Godin. So what that means is he spent 9 months in Seth's office fetching tea, where he learned a lot about marketing and entrepreneurship. So if you could put your hands together for Alan.
Thank you. Welcome everyone to Runway, and hope that you have a good time tonight. Runway is kind of like San Francisco's best kept secret. We're the fastest growing startup space here. We have about 70 startups. We've been around for only about 8 months. And some of the marketing tricks I learned from Seth, we didn't have a website. We didn't use Twitter. We didn't do Facebook. We didn't advertise at all. It was invitation only. And we ended up filling the space up in a matter of a few months and finding some amazing companies to be part of our community. Over the course of 8 months, we've had 4 companies exit for very significant sums of money. And we've built a really amazing community here. And welcome here to Runway. I got my start in this tech world through venture capital, actually. I launched a venture fund when I was an undergrad with some friends. We raised $20 million and invested in startups while going to school full time. We made about 15 investments and had 4 IPOs. The first 3 were about $1 billion IPOs. That was the average. And then our most recent one was about a little over a month ago, and it was only $500 million. So I sound really bad when I say it drags our average down. It's a horrible thing to say. And then I left the fund to build my own startup, which was then acquired by Rakuten, which is the e-commerce kind of Amazon of Asia. I've also done a YC startup myself and found out I can't build anything on just 25K. And so I have a lot of admiration for all of my other YC alums. And now I'm currently working on this project. And welcome once again to Runway. Thank you.
And our other 2 judges, we've got Tristan Langley from Southern Cross Venture Partners. I always get that wrong. And can you just pass? I'm going to get Tristan to introduce herself.
Thanks, Julia. So I've been in the Bay Area now for on and off for 11 years. I'm from Sydney, New South Wales, so my accent fades in and out. So if I'm talking to Aussies, I sound quite Australian. If I talk to Americans, I sort of get this twang back. Partly because from my experience back in 2002, 2003, 2004, when there weren't as many Aussies in the Bay Area, no one could understand me. And so, so I moved out here back in 2002 with Draper Fisher Jurvetson. I was an analyst with them. And the signature 2 deals that I worked on there were the Skype investment. We invested when there were 12 people. I led that deal. We sold them to eBay for $4.1 billion about 2 years later. And that was pretty exciting, pretty stressful, but a lot of fun. And then the other signature deal was X-Fi, which we sold to Viacom for over $100 million. So subsequent to that, I went to Stanford Business School. I went and lived in China for a little bit, worked for Renren. I worked for Samsung. And then after Stanford Business School, I went to work for Southern Cross. I went back to Australia, missed the entire GFC here. It was like rocking on in 2007, back down in Sydney. No idea what was going on here. Came back, 2009, landed back here, and then I've been working with Southern Cross Venture Partners as a venture partner. I cover all forms of tech. I've also served as a director with a group called Amalfi Capital, which is my own fund, and I serve on the board of, or the investment committee of a group called Thrive Foundation. And Southern Cross is a $400 million fund. We're headquartered in Sydney, Australia. We have offices in Brisbane and Palo Alto. We have a $200 million clean energy fund and $200 million dedicated to technology. So I've been dealing with all sorts of technologies from semiconductor materials to networking equipment, all the way through to e-commerce and mobile. So I span the gamut. But looking forward to hearing the pitches tonight, and I'll try to hold you all to a pretty high bar, which I've been able to experience in the last 10 years.
Thanks, Tristan. And we also have Mirav Block, who is lawyer turned VC, and now she has an enviable position at Square. She's on the international team. And she also writes a regular column for BRW, which is, for the Americans in the room, a prominent business publication in Australia.
Thanks, Julia. Hi, everyone. I am really, really excited to be here, and I guess I just wanted to echo some things that Nathan said, maybe put a little bit of a personal spin on them. I fell in love with tech in 2009. I was an M&A lawyer at the time, probably about as far away professionally from the tech scene as you can possibly be, working on mining deals. And my husband left his job to start a startup that ended up raising $11 million. And back then, 2009 is not that long ago, it's sort of 4 years, but the growth in the Australian tech startup scene since then has been enormous. Back then, you think of all the major institutions of the Australian tech scene now: Startmate, AngelCube, Pushstart, Yacht Butter Factory, Fishburners. None of these existed back then. And I think you sort of flash forward 4 years, and now you really feel, I think, the growth of the startup scene in Australia. One of my former colleagues at Square Capital, I think, captured this really well last week in a tweet. He was on his way to the launch party for Canva, which was one of the deals that I led last year, and he booked his travel to Sydney using WeGo, which was another portfolio company, caught his taxi to the party using Go Catch, that's it. That post-dated my time with Square Capital, and then sort of found himself at this party. And I think even to my life at Square, our wiki is hosted on Confluence, which is obviously an Atlassian product. Our staff feedback is done on Pulse, which is produced by a Melbourne company, Culture Amp. So it's really, really exciting to see this growth, see the Australian, and feel it here as well as in Australia. I also am very, very excited by the expansion of Silicon Valley companies to Australia, Yelp, Evernote, Uber more recently, and I think that does two things. I think it gives people experience of working with startups, and I think that the alumni of companies, of these sorts of companies, are sort of the startup founders of the future. I think it also forces Australian companies to be more innovative. It's not .com1 anymore. We can't just be local copycats of successful American models. I think we need to be sort of really innovative ideas on our own. So that's just my piece.
Thank you. A round of applause to the judges.